We have supposedly recorded every mountain, ruin, and square inch of this planet. However, we were never supposed to discover certain areas. Areas where the rocks appear to recall past events, where birds won't flutter, and where footprints disappear. The past is still very much alive, as you will hear if you pay close attention. All it has done is wait. What you're about to hear has been plucked from the very edge of our knowledge, and possibly beyond. If you find comfort in dreaming about long-lost mysteries, we invite you to subscribe and share your thoughts on what should be improved or explored next by leaving a comment below. Here we go. The Breathless Chamber. For many years, the inhabitants of northern Albania have lived in constant terror of a cave system hidden between steep limestone cliffs and dense old woods. A voice that has gone missing. The locals refer to it as Zirumbumber. The story goes that whomever ventures into the lowest chamber either stays silent or never comes out. A group of speleologists from a European institution embarked on a 2007 expedition to investigate the unexplored parts of the cavern network. What they discovered about 400 meters below Earth was man-made. Just beyond the typical limestone flows and shallow fissures, there was a narrow, perfectly straight channel adorned with chisel marks that were too consistent to be natural. There was a dry, circular room at the end of this shaft. Perched on a pedestal in the center was a solitary relic, a bronze mask with one side twisted so that it had wide-open eyes but no mouth. Unusually, the metal showed no signs of corrosion. Preserved. There were pieces of bone, fractured jawbones in particular, scattered around the base. It was as if the mask's wearer had been irrevocably silenced. When principal researcher Dr. Emmeline Rousseau stepped foot in the room, she felt a wave of terror wash over her, due to an internal issue rather than a fear of public speaking. Not with their ears, but in their minds, team members heard whispers. According to several, it was as if someone were squeezing their throats through the very core. However, the true terror started when the crew attempted to record the room. The recording did not work. Even when someone yelled, every attempt to record sound inside the chamber yielded nothing except static. Nothing happened during playback. No sound, not even the normal sounds of the cave, was audible in the footage of moving jaws. The very concept of sound seemed to vanish from that space. A lab in Basel was consulted for the analysis of the bronze mask. Its composition was an alloy that did not conform to any recorded recipe from antiquity. The mask contained embedded tiny passages that were so narrow that they resembled a labyrinth of airways that went nowhere, with a precision that defied human creation. The 3D scanning equipment malfunctioned when the researchers attempted to use it. When several hard disks were connected to the scanner, they were all erased. After Rousseau started having severe nightmares, he decided to leave the project. She assured her colleagues in her last email, "It's not a masquerade. We were foolish to handle this metal souvenir of a bygone era." Even now, the cave remains locked. Claims made by local authorities. A rock slide blocked the entrance, yet every few years, under other names and in stealth, satellite photographs reveal excavation work at the location. Some think the mask belonged to a culture that thought it was important to silence anyone who dared to know forbidden things. Some think the chamber was constructed with the express purpose of enclosing something. Therefore, its discovery was never meant to happen. Only a noise, no living being. An extremely risky word. A term that has been dormant for a long time, just waiting for its next breather to emerge. So next are times when you're by yourself and the silence is just a touch too heavy. Consider this. What if Saqqara's mirror isn't merely the lack of sound, but something else entirely? Something was discovered under the western Oman sands in 1926 by a British exploring party. Something that no museum would ever dare to exhibit, and about which the majority of the crew remained silent. None of it was gold. They weren't gems. It was just one artifact, a mirror that was black, perfectly round, cold to the touch, and incredibly smooth. They discovered it in what seemed like a cave-like underground room under the crumbling remains of a pre-Islamic defense. Walls burned with what appeared to be burn marks, long parallel streaks like claws made of flame, instead of carvings or inscriptions, filled the chamber. Resting on a pedestal of stone that was foreign to the area, the object remained erect and uncontaminated by dust. Edward Apprentice, one of the men, said in his notebook, "It's not a mirror, neither precisely nor reflectively. This is similar to peering into a, just in case I forget about you." Its moniker was Mirror of Sahakra, taken from a clumsily carved name on a neighboring sandstone slab, despite the fact that no ancient tongue has any mention of its name. However, it wasn't merely the item that unsettled the crew. It was the result of their attempts to investigate it. Team members started having the same dreams one after the other. Submerged beneath a lifeless sky was a grand obsidian hall inhabited by swaying sculptures that spurted sand upon contact. A woman or an object with a female silhouette stands in the middle of the hall, towering, veiled in see-through veils, faceless. Standing quietly beside the identical mirror they had found, she would slowly raise her hands as if to invite them inside in each dream. The dreams became more vivid. While looking at the lamplit mirror, one individual, Philip Mercer, had a seizure. While he was convulsing, he insisted he saw eyes behind the glass and a mouth that didn't fit any living thing. A heart arrest took his life 2 days afterwards. The insides of his fingernails were discovered to be scorched. That detail was never made public. The British Museum quietly classified the artifact and sealed the records, but whispers leaked. A few surviving photos show the object wrapped tightly in dark cloth and sealed in an iron container with no explanation. A private letter from one expedition member to a family friend stated, "We didn't discover it. It let us find it." What makes this even more unsettling is that this wasn't the first time such a mirror had been encountered. In 1842, an Ottoman official reported the excavation of a similar object near Harran, Turkey, beneath the foundations of what was once an ancient star temple. The records mention an unseeable reflection and the return of forgotten thoughts. That artifact, too, vanished without further record. Though later blueprints for a storage facility in Istanbul show a heavily fortified room labeled only Object K. And even earlier 12th century Arabic texts from Al-Andalus speak cryptically of the Inzala, the Eye of Silence, described as a circular pool of shadow that saw not your face but your soul. Poets called it a tool of prophecy. Mystics called it a weapon. One writer, Ibn Khalim, warned, "Do not peer long, lest you see the world without yourself in it. In all the accounts across centuries, the patterns are the same." The artifact is discovered. Strange dreams follow, and then silence. No one ever keeps it. No one can destroy it, and it always disappears. So, where's the mirror of Sahakara now? The last trace comes from a confidential NATO logistics document dated 19. It references an anomalous, high-density object transferred to a subterranean archive in Greenland, stored at a depth of over 300 meters. The document is heavily redacted, but includes one unnerving detail: access denied to all AI-adjacent technologies, whatever that means. Researchers who've tried to reconstruct the mirror's purpose point to ancient Mesopotamian lore about seeing stones used not to predict the future, but to bind memory. Not just human memory, but memory stored in the earth and time itself. Some believe the mirror records everything it witnesses, that it stores time and can replay it in ways we were never meant to understand. Others think it's older than history, that it's not an artifact, but a sentinel, a lock, a test. And those who've stood before it, those few who claim to have looked directly into it without turning away, all say the same thing: that the longer you look, the less you feel like you're looking into a thing. You begin to feel like it's looking through you. And just before you pull away, in that last second when your breath tightens and your thoughts vanish, you realize something. You aren't seeing your reflection. You're seeing your replacement. The chamber beneath the 8th step. There's a staircase in southern Turkey that was never meant to be found. Hidden beneath a collapsed section of Mount Nut, far from the tourist zone with its stone heads and scattered ruins. This staircase leads down into something even the locals avoid mentioning. It's not on any map, and it's not part of any official excavation. Those who've heard of it call it the descent, and they say the deeper you go, the more you feel like you're being remembered by something ancient. It started with a landslide in the early 2000s after unusually heavy rains cracked open a section of the mountainside. A shepherd named Autumn stumbled across it first. He wasn't looking for anything. He was just searching for a lost goat when he saw stones arranged in deliberate rows descending into blackness. When he followed them, counting each one, he stopped on the 8th step because something about it felt wrong. The stone there was darker, warmer, as if it had absorbed something it shouldn't have. Autumn placed his hand on it, and for years afterward, he would say it felt like touching memory, not his own, something older, deeper, and cold despite the heat. He didn't continue down. He went back to his village and never returned. But word spread. Eventually, an archaeologist named Dr. Selent Tarkin took interest. She had spent her entire career studying Anatolian tombs and pre-Hittite sites. But this was different. There were no records of anything being built into that section of the mountain. And yet, the satellite scans confirmed it. A network of chambers, tunnels, and voids that had never been mapped. Selent assembled a small private team, no universities, no press. They reached the staircase in 2011, clearing centuries of debris. The steps led down deeper than any of them expected. 20, 40, 60. And the stone on the 8th, it really was different. It wasn't from the same quarry. It wasn't even the same composition. It had magnetic properties, and it vibrated faintly when touched, like a heartbeat. As they descended past it, the air grew heavy, not just in pressure, but in presence. Some team members described a sensation like being watched. Others said it felt like walking through liquid thought. When they reached the base of the staircase, what they found didn't fit into any known history. It was a chamber, perfectly circular, carved from obsidian-like rock, smooth and gleaming. At the center stood a pillar about 6 feet tall, covered in glyphs that didn't match Sumerian, Hittite, or even the strange early pictographs found in Baklit. But the most terrifying detail, the glyphs moved slowly, as if rewriting themselves. Selent's team began documenting. One researcher, Tomas, became obsessed. He claimed the glyphs spoke, not audibly, but through thought. He stopped sleeping. Then he stopped eating. One night, he was found kneeling beside the pillar, blood on his fingertips where he had carved similar glyphs into his own arms. They evacuated, but not before placing a data logger in the chamber to monitor movement and sound. The data it sent back over the following weeks showed temperature fluctuations in precise 88-minute intervals and a low-frequency hum rising each time, peaking, then vanishing. Then one night, the feed cut off completely. The signal didn't go dead. It stopped existing. Every recording from the chamber's final night was overwritten by static, except for a 3 second on clip, a whisper not in any language known to man. But it wasn't random. It had structure, rhythm, like speech. When Doctor tried to share the findings, her funding was pulled. Institutions she had worked with for decades distanced themselves. Even her colleagues stopped returning her calls. She disappeared from public life in 2015. Her last email sent to a colleague simply read, "It's not architecture, it's anatomy." Later expeditions sent to the site found the staircase sealed, as though the mountain had healed itself. But seismic scans in 2020 showed that the chambers are still there, deeper. Now, as if the structure is descending on its own. No one speaks about it publicly. But whispers continue about a place built not to bury the dead, but to contain a living memory, something that was not built by humans, something that might not be sleeping, but waiting. The locals still warn travelers not to linger near the collapsed mountain face. They say you can still hear something breathing just beneath the rock. And if you step too close, especially near the 8th stair, you might feel it notice you back. The chamber that breathes beneath Lake Baikal. Far in the icy heart of Siberia lies one of the most mysterious bodies of water on Earth. Lake Baikal, the deepest, oldest freshwater lake in the world. A place that holds more water than all the Great Lakes of North America combined. A place so remote, so vast that many believe its secrets have never fully surfaced. But beneath the frozen waves and shifting ice, researchers and explorers have whispered about something else. A chamber, a structure buried below the lake bed, a space that, according to acoustic scans, doesn't just exist. It behaves as though it's alive. The story begins not in ancient times, but in the late 1980s. Soviet researchers mapping the lake floor using early sonar equipment began to notice something odd. In the southern basin of the lake, near a steep underwater slope, there was a void. Not an ordinary geological gap. Not a fault. This was a symmetrical domed cavity, like a bubble of air or a stone temple frozen beneath layers of mud and rock. The sonar pulses bounced back slower in this one region, slower than they should have, as if the space beneath the lake bed was shifting, expanding, contracting, not quickly, not dramatically, just slightly, gently, as if the chamber were breathing. The scientists dismissed it at first. Equipment errors, maybe interference from methane bubbles, which are known to rise from deep within Lake Ball's crust. But later scans showed the same anomaly. And in 1991, a diver named Mikhail Vosin, who had been assisting with an underwater pipeline inspection, came across something he couldn't explain. He described seeing on the lake bed a perfectly round patch of stone, unlike the surrounding terrain, smooth, unnatural, with strange markings that looked eroded but deliberate. He swam closer, took a photograph, and returned to the surface. The photo has since vanished. Officially, the dive log says the inspection was uneventful. Unofficially, Vosin never dove again. Colleagues said he became quiet, obsessed. He kept sketches of what he saw, circular engravings, patterns that didn't match any known local culture. And most disturbingly, he believed the stone circle was not a seal or entrance, but the top of something, a structure much larger, buried deep below. A year later, in 1992, an independent group of Russian scientists and explorers attempted to locate the site based on Vosin's sketches and notes. They used updated sonar systems, high-frequency acoustic mapping, and satellite thermal data. What they found startled them. Temperature fluctuations, small, but statistically significant over the same region of the lake. A heat signature coming from below the lake floor, not consistent with geothermal vents, not volcanic. And then there was the sound. Their equipment picked up a low-frequency hum, repeating every 88 seconds, barely audible, below the range of human hearing, but consistent, rhythmic, artificial. It didn't match any known biological or geological process. There were no whales, no machines, no recorded earthquakes, just the pulse, 88 seconds, over and over again. The team stayed for a week. On the final day, one of the submersibles malfunctioned. Not broken, just unresponsive, as if something interfered with the signal. The vehicle returned hours later. Its external cameras had shut down. Its navigation system scrambled. The data on board corrupted. They left without answers. And the site, somewhere in the southern basin of Lake Ball, was left untouched for years. But not everyone forgot. A researcher named Dr. Lena Kovalino began compiling reports of strange events around the lake. She wasn't an archaeologist. She studied geology and hydrology, but what she found led her down an unexpected path. Local fishermen had reported seeing lights beneath the ice, glows that moved in patterns, silent, unexplained. Some divers had spoken of pressure changes deep in the lake that didn't follow any normal depth curve. Others had mentioned sudden headaches, confusion, and in one case, memory loss. But what struck Dr. Kovalino most was an old Siberian folktale. It spoke of a spirit beneath the water. Not a god, not a monster, but a listener, a watcher. The myth claimed that beneath the lake, buried in ice and stone, was a chamber built by those who walked before time. A place built to hear, to record, and to wait. Wait for what? The story doesn't say, just that the chamber would one day open again. Kovalino compared ancient tribal carvings found near the lake's edge. Some matched the shapes described in Vosin's sketches. Circles within circles, spiral motifs, eyes without faces. She wasn't the first to notice. In 2009, A private tech company from Japan used deep penetrating radar on the lake as part of a geothermal project. Their scans caught an anomaly similar to what the Soviets had described. A dome, hollow, still there, still breathing. There were efforts to explore further, but all met strange resistance. Equipment failed. Permissions were revoked. Ice flows cut off access. Some believe the lake doesn't want to be disturbed. Others say that something is actively protecting that part of the lake. A handful of theories have emerged. One is that it's a natural gas pocket, a perfectly sealed bubble of methane under pressure reacting subtly to external temperatures. But this doesn't explain the rhythmic hum. Another theory is that it's an ancient structure, maybe an observatory or a vault built long before the last ice age, now buried under sediment and secrecy. And then there's the third theory that it's not human. That long before us, someone or something left a machine beneath the water, a mechanism designed to operate on time frames we cannot grasp, measuring something we don't yet understand, and perhaps one day doing something we're not prepared for. Lake Baikal remains silent, but every so often, strange readings still come in. The pulse continues, always 88 seconds, always waiting. The forgotten doors of Mount Roraima. Deep in the borderlands between Venezuela, Brazil, and Guyana, rising through the dense mist of the Amazon jungle, is a place that barely feels like it belongs on Earth. Mount Roraima, a flat-topped mountain that towers like a stone island. In the clouds, its vertical cliffs rise nearly 1,000 feet from the jungle floor, and its summit is shrouded in a thick fog almost every day of the year. It's not just beautiful, it's otherworldly. This mountain has long been sacred to the indigenous Payman and Kappan people. To them, it is the stump of a mighty tree that once held all the fruits of the world, cut down by their gods in ancient times. But the legends go further, much further. They speak of gates on the summit, doors that appear when the fog is thickest, and they say, if you pass through one of them, you never come back. Most dismiss these stories as metaphor, myths about life and death. But in the last 60 years, a pattern has begun to emerge. Disappearing people. Not many, but enough to make you wonder. In 1970, a small geological survey team went missing on the plateau. They were mapping the unique rock formations and reported strange compass errors. The last radio transmission simply said the weather had changed. Then silence, no. Distress signal, no flares, no emergency beacon. When rescue teams arrived, the camp was still there, equipment undisturbed, backpacks left open, food unwrapped, but not a single person. Their footprints led only a few feet beyond the tents, then vanished completely. The ground was dry, no storms, no animals. There was nothing. Years later, a botanist named Dr. Carlos Neves became fascinated with the unusual plant species on Roraima. Many plants on the summit don't exist anywhere else on Earth. Some look completely alien. Tall, stalks with black-red leaves, flowers that close the moment you approach. As if hiding something, he began collecting samples. But what puzzled him wasn't the flora. It was what he found between two standing stones. Stones with nearly identical dimensions and shapes. A wall of air. That's how he described it. A shimmer. A subtle flicker in the space between them. He couldn't walk through. He couldn't touch it. It wasn't cold or warm. It was just there. He took photos. But in the photos, nothing appeared. Just two rocks and sky. He didn't report it officially until 5 years later. By then, the shimmer had never returned. And yet, the stories persisted. Hikers told of strange echoes on the summit, voices repeating back in languages no one spoke. Others described sudden, unexplainable nausea when approaching certain boulders, even equipment malfunctions, drones falling from the air, batteries draining within minutes. Then in 2013, satellite imaging revealed something strange. A heat anomaly near the summit. A rectangulaire signature. Warmer than the surrounding rock. Not enough to be volcanic, but large, almost precisely rectangular. When a surveyor group tried to reach it weeks later, they found no structure, only fog. The thermal signature had vanished. Researchers who've studied Mount Roraima agree on one thing. The geology is unique. It's part of the Ghana Shield, a rock formation over 2 billion years old, one of the oldest places on the planet. Many parts of the summit remain unexplored even today, but it's the recurring motif in indigenous oral history that keeps coming back the doors. They're said to be guardians or traps or passageways to another realm entirely, not metaphorical realms, literal ones. One account tells of a young man who wandered onto the summit in the early 1900s during a spiritual rite. His tribe waited for him for 2 days. When he didn't return, they sent scouts. They found nothing. Decades later, a missionary claimed to have met an old man in another village who spoke of waking up on a mountain he didn't recognize. The stars had changed. The plans were wrong. He was terrified. The missionary said the man didn't speak like anyone from that region, and he claimed to have been born near Mount Roraima. But what shocked him most, the man was missing an eye. And the tribal story from the early 1900s mentioned that the missing boy had only one eye due to a childhood injury. No one could explain it. And even now, hikers and explorers occasionally claim to see shapes in the fog. Dew-shaped shadows, perfectly rectangular, standing silently in the mist, never moving, never changing, just there until the mist clears and then they're gone. Could these be simple tricks of the light pareidolia? Our brains making patterns out of randomness? Or is it possible, just barely, that something ancient was built there, hidden by time, protected by remoteness, and only briefly revealed when conditions are right? Mount Roraima does not give up its secrets easily. But one day, the mist may part, and one of those doors might remain open, and someone someday might walk through the cursed labyrinth beneath the Black Sea. Not all lost civilizations are buried under sand or jungle. Some lie beneath waves, deep, dark, silent, forgotten. But every once in a while, something shifts. Something strange gets pulled up from the bottom, and the questions start all over again. In 2000, 2 marine archaeologists scanning the seabed near the Black Sea coast of Turkey stumbled onto something they weren't looking for. At first, the sonar data just showed a series of odd symmetrical patterns, rectangular, aligned, buried under layers of sediment and algae. At first glance, they looked like natural formations. But the more they mapped it, the more it started to resemble the floor plan of a structure. Not just any structure, but an intentional layout, corridors, rooms, enclosures, a possible temple complex submerged in a place that, according to every historical record, should never have held anything like it. The deeper they looked, the stranger it got. The Black Sea is a unique body of water. Unlike most seas, its deep layers are anoxic, meaning there's no oxygen down there. Because of this, the sea preserves organic material for thousands of years. Wooden beams, human bones, even woven fabrics can survive intact, untouched by rot or bacteria. That preservation is what makes the mystery so vivid. Divers working slowly and carefully in nearly pitch-black conditions brought up samples of carved stone, strange pottery fragments, and wooden supports that radiocarbon dated back nearly 7,000 years. That's far older than anything expected in that region. Older than Troy, older than the pyramids, and that's when whispers of something ancient began to grow. There were local legends, mostly forgotten by modern villages, of a sunken labyrinth beneath the sea, a place said to be built by an unnamed people before the waters rose, long before the known kingdoms ever ruled Anatolia. Most historians brushed it off. There's always folklore. But what if this time there was something to it? Geologists studying the area noted something strange about the Black Sea itself. Thousands of years ago, it wasn't a sea at all, at least not as we know it. It was a freshwater lake surrounded by fertile land and possibly populated by early human settlements. But then something catastrophic happened. A rapid flood. Sea levels surged. Salt water from the Mediterranean poured in through the Bozrah Strait. It turned the lake into the modern Black Sea in a geological instant. Some believe this sudden deluge inspired flood myths like the story of Noah. Now imagine a civilization, small but thriving, wiped out by that flood. Imagine a temple complex buried beneath a rising tide, sealed beneath layers of silt for millennia. This is what many now believe happened at the site, but no one knows who built it. There are no written records, no carvings in a known language, just architecture, alignment, and unsettling design choices. Some of the stone slabs, pulled up, seem scorched. Others are stained with strange mineral streaks, as if exposed to extreme heat or chemical reactions. Some researchers believe the labyrinth wasn't just ceremonial. It may have had a function, a kind of chamber design that funneled water or sound or something else entirely. And here's where it gets a little disturbing. Several divers have reported strange experiences while exploring the ruins. Feelings of pressure, disorientation, sudden cold despite stable temperatures. One even claimed to hear what sounded like a deep hum, so low it couldn't be recorded, but felt through the chest like a vibration. Skeptics call it nitrogen narcosis, a known effect of deep diving. But those who've been there aren't so sure. Something about the place just doesn't feel like a normal ruin. Could have been a site of early science or something else entirely. And perhaps most frustratingly, no one's allowed to study it in depth anymore. Funding dried up, permits stalled. The site is now officially protected, but in a way that ensures almost no one can go there. Why? No one really knows. But rumors spread fast in the archaeology world. Some believe a private organization may have stepped in. Others say the site was simply too dangerous, too unstable to excavate without risking lives. But for those who've glimpsed it, those quiet stone corridors deep under the sea still haunt them. Because it's not just a ruin, one we can't quite translate. What if this labyrinth wasn't just lost to water, but erased from memory? And if so, what did it hold? We may never get a full answer, but the silence of that place speaks louder than words. Something was built beneath the Black Sea. Something deliberate, something human or close to it from a time when nothing like that should have existed. And until someone returns, it will wait, unseen, unexplained. The Cocknose Stone and the forgotten map to the stars. In a quiet field on the outskirts of Glasgow, under layers of soil and moss, lies one of the most mysterious artifacts ever uncovered in Britain. It isn't marked on many maps, and even some locals don't know it exists. But beneath that patch of land rests a massive slab of rock, 43 feet long and 26 feet wide, etched with symbols that no one alive today can truly understand. It's called the Cocknose Stone, and it might be a message from a civilization we barely know existed. The stone first came to public attention in 1887 when a local minister, Reverend James Harvey, stumbled upon it while walking through the fields of West Dumbarton. What caught his eye wasn't the size of the stone that was hidden, but the faint lines poking through the soil. Curious, he began clearing away the earth. What emerged was extraordinary. Dozens upon dozens of carved symbols, spirals, grooves, circles, and mysterious patterns covering the entire surface of the rock. Harvey called in archaeologists. And for the first time in recorded history, the Cocknose Stone was studied. What was immediately clear was its age. Some estimates place the carvings as far back as 5,000 years. That would mean it predates the pyramids of Giza and Stonehenge. It was old and yet incredibly intricate. More than 90 cup and ring marks were carved into the surface, a type of prehistoric art found in only a few places across Europe, but nowhere else were they found at this scale or density. This wasn't casual decoration. This was something else. A message, a map, a monument. Theories began to circulate. Some believed the markings represented a cosmological map, constellations, planetary movements, or celestial events witnessed by ancient people. Others thought it was a sacred site used for rituals or spiritual ceremonies. The stone's location and orientation seemed to align with solar and lunar cycles. Certain patterns even corresponded to stars no longer visible. From Earth due to the shifting of the planet's axis over millennia. This raised uncomfortable questions. Were ancient people capable of tracking such changes? And if so, how did they do it? Adding to the mystery, no evidence of a nearby settlement has ever been found. No tools, no burial grounds, no homes. The people who carved this massive stone left no trace of themselves except for the patterns they etched into the rock. It's as if they appeared just long enough to make their mark on the land, and then vanished. In the mid-century, something strange happened. Authorities concerned about vandalism and erosion made the decision to cover the stone. In 1965, they buried the Cocknose stone beneath layers of soil and rock to protect it from further damage. For 50 years, the stone disappeared from public view, becoming more of a legend than a reality. Only a handful of photographs and pencil sketches remained. Then in 2015, archaeologist Dr. Kenny Brophy led a team to re-excavate the site. This time they came, prepared with drones, 3D scanning equipment, and high-resolution photography. The goal was to digitally preserve the carvings before the stone was re-ride once again. What they uncovered exceeded expectations. The symbols were clearer and more complex than anyone had imagined. Some of the carvings looked machine-made, precise, deliberate, and perfectly spaced. Yet, they were created thousands of years before machines existed. Dr. Brophy noted something curious. The design of the symbols seemed to make more sense when viewed from above. That led to a controversial idea. Maybe the stone wasn't meant to be seen from ground level. But how would people thousands of years ago have viewed it from the sky? Were they building elevated platforms? Or was the stone itself a kind of message intended for something or someone looking down from above? This suggestion brought in a wave of fringe theories. Some speculated the stone was created with help from advanced beings or lost civilizations. Others claimed it was a landing site or a navigational map, visible from the sky. While mainstream archaeologists remain skeptical, they don't deny that the markings defy easy explanation. There's also a quiet emotional weight to the Cocknose stone. These carvings were made by human hands that gripped primitive tools, scraping grooves into stone for hours, days, maybe even years. No one carves for that long without a purpose. They weren't decorating. They were remembering, recording, sending a message across time. And we in a modern world still haven't figured out what they were trying to say. When the 3D scans were complete, the stone was covered once again. It lies there, still beneath the same quiet field, hidden under layers of soil. But something about it lingers. You don't need to see it to feel its presence. Knowing it's there, massive, silent, and unsolved, has a strange effect on people. It humbles us, reminds us that not everything is knowable, that there are truths written in stone that we may never read. And yet the Cocknose stone waits as it has for thousands of years. Unread, undeciphered, but not forgotten. Maybe the message wasn't meant for understanding. Maybe it was meant for remembering. And that we can still do. The pyramid beneath Rock Lake. There's a lake in southern Wisconsin, quiet and shallow, often overlooked by those traveling north toward the more famous shores of the Great Lakes. But those who've lived near Rock Lake long enough all seem to carry a quiet curiosity, a persistent rumor passed between generations. Beneath the rippling surface of this ordinary-looking lake, they say, lies a pyramid, not a natural hill or a pile of stone, but a real structure submerged, ancient, and built by hands that no one can identify. The story begins in earnest in the early 20th century. But whispers of strange things seen in the lake go back much further, back to the Native American tribes who once settled these lands. The Ho-Chunk people, who have called Wisconsin home for centuries, told of a time when Rock Lake's water line was lower, revealing large stone structures near the edges. Some even claim to have walked among them. Later, when the water levels rose, the structures disappeared again, buried beneath the silt and the gentle waves. It wasn't until the 1930s, during an unusually dry summer, that something tangible reignited the mystery. The lake's water receded dramatically, and local residents began to report seeing shapes in the shallows, stone foundations arranged in a way that didn't look random. One man in particular, a local pilot, decided to take to the skies. From his plane, he saw it, a massive triangle sitting just below the surface, its sides nearly perfect in symmetry, resembling nothing less than a pyramid. Newspapers picked up the story. Divers were sent in. What they found or claimed to find deepened the mystery. Large, precisely cut stones arranged in geometric patterns, walls, corners, pathways that seemed to lead somewhere, and always at the heart of it, a single structure shaped like a step pyramid, partially buried by time and silt. But as with so many unexplained structures, skepticism followed quickly. Some said it was natural geology. Others claimed it was debris from early settlers or glacial formations misunderstood by overenthusiastic divers. Still, no official survey or excavation was conducted. The lake remained untouched. That changed in the 1980s when a group of amateur underwater archaeologists returned to the site with sonar equipment. What they detected shocked even them. The readings showed straight lines, right angles, and what appeared to be terrace features, something nature rarely produces on its own. In a lake only a few meters deep, there seemed to be an entire structure sitting right on the lake bed. They called it the Rock Lake Pyramid, not because it was tall or made of gold, but because of its unmistakable shape. Divers reported being able to swim around its sides, noting how the rocks seemed too precisely placed to be random. Some even claimed the stones were stacked in a stair-like fashion, 5 levels tall, but visibility was poor and thick algae covered most of the surface. Then, curiously, the state stepped in. No official excavation has ever been permitted. No archaeological team from a major university has been allowed to explore the site in full. The reasons have never been made clear. Some say it's because the structure doesn't exist. Others think the authorities simply don't want to risk stirring conspiracy theories. But a few believe the opposite, that something important lies beneath Rock Lake, and it's better left untouched. This brings us to a strange detail. Less than a mile from Rock Lake lies a very different archaeological site, Owen. Here, archaeologists have found the remains of a Mississippian culture city complete with earthen mounds, palisade walls, and ceremonial structures. The site is dated to around 900 CE, and yet it contains features that seem out of place. Stone tools and pottery found at Aeon resemble those from thousands of miles away, not from the known Mississippian region. One mound, in particular, aligns perfectly with the sun on the summer solstice. Another mound sits in an orientation that seems to mirror the shape of Orion's belt. Some have wondered, was Elan a ceremonial site because of something hidden nearby? Was Rock Lake once part of a sacred region that extended beyond its waters? No one knows for sure, but the alignments, the proximity, the underwater structures, they all seem to speak to something bigger than coincidence. One diver, now in his 70s, once described the experience of swimming over the supposed pyramid. He said the silence down there was absolute, that something about the shape, even covered in algae and mud, still made him feel like he was floating over a forgotten temple. Something built with purpose and something left behind. There's a melancholy to places like this, a feeling that what we see above the surface is only the smallest part of a much deeper story. We walk beside lakes, never knowing what might lie beneath. We pass over clues left in mud and stone, carved by people whose names are lost to time. Maybe the Rock Lake Pyramid is real. Maybe it's a trick of shadows and stones. But the feeling it gives of something ancient watching us through the water, that is very real indeed. And in the quiet moments when the water is still and the world is calm, you can almost imagine the builders returning not with tools or blueprints, but with memory, walking again through submerged hallways that the rest of us only glimpse when the light hits the surface just right. And even then, we still don't understand what they were building or why. But perhaps they knew we would wonder. And perhaps that was the point all along. The tomb of the Cloud People. In the misty heights of northern Peru, far beyond the reach of busy cities and modern noise, there lies a plateau wrapped in clouds and quiet. Few people venture here, not because it's forbidden, but because it's forgotten. Yet here, nestled among towering cliffs and veiled by mountain fog, archaeologists made a discovery so strange, so out of place that even now, decades later, it stirs the imagination of anyone who hears of it. They called them the Cloud People, a culture lost to time. Their name today is the Chachia. The Chapoa were not the most powerful empire, nor the most widespread, but they built cities in the sky, stone dwellings perched on cliff sides thousands of feet above the jungle. One such place is known as Quap. It's a massive, fortress-like city built from cyclopean stone blocks, older than many of the more famous ruins to the south. When archaeologists first began exploring Quap, they expected it to be another relic of the Inca conquest, but what they found was far stranger. Inside Quap and its surrounding mountain ridges, explorers began uncovering tombs. These were no ordinary burial chambers. They were sculpted into sheer cliff faces like shelves built into the sky. Many contained mummies sitting upright wrapped in cloth, their faces painted with solemn expressions. But even more curious were the sarcophagi. Unlike the stone coffins we find in Egypt or the underground crypts of Europe, the Cha-Cha sarcophagi were made of clay and straw painted with haunting eyes and shaped to look like standing figures. Some stood over 2 m tall. They lined the cliff walls like watchmen. For centuries, locals called them poor machos, ancient ones. They stared out over the vast mountain valleys, unmoving as if watching something we no longer see. No roads lead directly to these tombs. Getting to them often requires climbing vertical cliffs or rappelling down ropes. It begs the question, who were these people who buried their dead? In the most unreachable places? And why go to such lengths to keep the tombs so high, so hidden? Some researchers believe it was for protection from enemies or from floods. Others think it was spiritual, that these high places brought the dead closer to the sky, to their gods, or to the stars. But there's another theory whispered quietly by some archaeologists who have spent years in the field. These tombs weren't just graves. They were messages. The positioning of the sarcophagi, the way they face their grouping, all seem intentional. One set of tombs found along a cliffside in the Utukub-Bamba Valley aligns precisely with the solstice sun. Another set mimics the pattern of 3 stars from the Orion constellation. These are alignments that are hard to ignore and even harder to explain as coincidence. More than one researcher has noted that the cloud people seemed obsessed with height. They didn't just live in the clouds, they buried their dead even higher. It was as if they believed the dead had to stay above the world, above the noise, above the decay of jungle and time. But one discovery deepened the mystery. In the early 2000s, while clearing debris near an unmapped tomb structure, a team of Peruvian archaeologists uncovered an interior chamber with no entrance. The walls were sealed. The only way in was to chip carefully through. Inside, they found an untouched mummy wrapped in layers of unfamiliar textile. The face was painted not in red or brown, as was common, but in pale blue. In its hands, it held something strange, a tablet made of polished stone with markings that resembled no known language. The artifact was removed and taken to Lima. There, language specialists and anthropologists tried to decode the symbols. They weren't Incan. They weren't even from any known pre-Columbian language family. Some suggested they were astronomical markers. Others believed it was a kind of proto-script language in its earliest form. Still, nothing definitive has been proven. Soon after, funding for further excavation mysteriously dried up. The project was paused. The tomb was sealed again. Officially, the site remains under conservation. But those who saw the markings say they felt something unshakable, a sense that the cloud people were not just burying their dead, but preserving knowledge, mapping stars, remembering something the rest of the world had long forgotten. Even now, the tombs remain on their cliffs, surrounded by mist, their painted eyes staring into eternity. And somewhere in the quiet mountains of Peru, perhaps there are more sealed chambers, more blue-faced mummies, more ancient tablets with unreadable messages. Some nights, when the wind is right, the villagers below say they can hear whispers on the cliffs. Not voices exactly, but a kind of echo, a low hum that rises and falls like breath. Maybe it's the wind, or maybe, just maybe, it's the cloud people still watching, still waiting, hoping someone will come along who finally understand what they were trying to say. And maybe one day we will. The Vault of the Birdless Mountain. In the highlands of eastern Turkey, where snow lingers laid into the spring and the wind whistles through empty passes, There's a mountain the locals do not name aloud. Even in villages miles away, the people speak of it only in hushed tones, calling it the Birdless Mountain. For reasons no one has ever explained. No birds fly over it. Migratory paths curve unnaturally away. There are no nests, no feathers found in its forests. Not a single chirp has been recorded near its summit. This strange silence caught the attention of a geophysical survey team in the late 1990s who had been mapping anomalies in Earth's magnetic field. On satellite data, they saw something odd, an electromagnetic void not caused by altitude or rock type, but something deeper, something that seemed to suppress natural frequencies altogether. The mountain lying just east of the better-known Mount Ararat was long associated with stories of watchers, fallen stars, and ancient machines buried in the rock. Locals claimed that when the wind blew from the east, you could hear the mountain humming like an engine idling beneath stone. Curious and skeptical, the team hiked into the region with permission from the Turkish Ministry of Culture. What they discovered buried into the cliffside of a glacial valley changed everything. Behind a curtain of moss and weathered granite, a crack in the rock opened into a narrow chamber. Inside, perfect symmetry, not natural, a corridor carved cleanly leading into the mountain. They found metal, not rusted, not corroded, cold black metal that didn't reflect light properly, like it swallowed it. It was built into the walls, curved and smooth, lined with what looked like an embedded rail system that stretched deeper than they could follow in one day. 3 days in, they uncovered a chamber that would later be known in classified documents as Site D17. In its center was a massive hemispherical vault door. It was sealed tight, no lock, no visible seam, but it vibrated imperceptibly but consistently. Instruments went haywire, compasses, spun, baterias drained. The team reported artifacts, rings of interlocking brass too intricate for modern machining, a small orb made of layered glass, and a golden alloy no lab has ever fully identified, and strange plates with inlaid grooves that didn't match any known language, but looked eerily like modern printed circuit boards. Then came the smell, a sulfurous scent, not of rot, not of decay, something else. They stopped sleeping soundly. Some team members began dreaming of a spiral descending through ice, a cave with no floor. Others reported missing time, watches out of sync, conversations they didn't remember having. By week 2, one member, a geologist named Dr. Anelkis, left the site abruptly. He returned home, locked himself in his apartment, and a month later vanished. All that was left behind was a notebook filled with sketches, featherless birds, clockwork skulls, and a winged figure kneeling before a machine with 1,000 dials. The project was officially suspended. The area was sealed off, deemed unstable due to icefall hazards, but quietly samples were extracted. A French laboratory studying one alloy fragment concluded it contained a crystalline form of osmium not naturally occurring. A Japanese university measured zero radio decay in another metal piece, suggesting it had been artificially stabilized for hundreds of thousands of years. And then came the most unsettling piece. In a carbonated wooden container, preserved impossibly well in the cold, dry cave, they found what looked like a manuscript, the language unknown, but illustrations were unmistakable. A star map not from Earth's view, but from another solar system entirely, and in its center, Earth highlighted in red ink. Why would an ancient culture create a star map from an alien perspective unless they had seen it? Today, the Birdless Mountain remains off-limits to travelers. Satellite images are often blurry, glitched, even over its coordinates. No official team has returned since, but rumors persist that there's still a ticking sound from within the vault that's seismic. Instruments catch rhythmic pulses every 72 days, and that birds still never fly overhead. So, what was the vault of the Birdless Mountain? A shelter, a machine, a warning, or was it not built by humans at all? As you fall asleep tonight, let your mind drift to that frozen cliffside chamber, to the hidden vault humming quietly beneath layers of time. Ask yourself, What kind of civilization would build something meant to last longer than memory? And are they truly gone or only sleeping beneath the rock? Waiting to be heard again? The Forest of the Frozen Faces. In a remote corner of the Siberian taiga, there is a forest so untouched, so ancient that even seasoned explorers hesitate to step within. Local reindeer herders call it the Whispering Pines, not because of the wind, but because the trees are said to carry voices, low, mournful voices that echo between the frost-laced branches. For generations, the Aini elders have warned of this place, not because of wolves or ice, but because of the statues. Deep within this forest, half buried beneath moss and snow, explorers discovered what appeared at first to be crude boulders. But as light and shadow shifted, the outlines revealed more. Frozen into the landscape were faces, dozens of them, each carved in stone, yet so lilac it appeared they were once human. Some seemed to scream, others appeared solemn, eyes closed, lips parted just slightly, as though whispering secrets. The first proper expedition was sent in 1993, led by a Russian geologist named Tatyana Vyalova. What they found was beyond expectation. The forest floor was littered with fragments of tools, broken slates with unknown markings, and curious pieces of metal so finely wrought they could not be dated. Vyalova's team unearthed one full statue, a kneeling figure, arms crossed with what looked like carved frost patterns across its skin. When they tried to move it, it cracked open, revealing not stone inside, but what looked disturbingly like a hollow cavity, as if it had once held something living. Even stranger, the soil beneath the statues was found to contain unusually high levels of radiation, pockets of concentrated energy that defied natural explanation. Nearby, trees grew in twisted, spiraling patterns. Wildlife avoided the region entirely. In the nights that followed the discovery, members of the team reported hearing laughter, childlike and cruel, coming from the trees. Others reported seeing small figures darting just out of sight. One night, 2 researchers went missing. Their tents remained zipped, their boots still. Placed neatly outside, they were never found. Expedition records show Vyalova ordered a full evacuation the next morning. Her notes abruptly stop a few pages later. She was found months later in Moscow, silent and severely emaciated, clutching a stone shard carved with one of the forest faces. She never spoke again. Theories flooded in. Some believed the statues were ritualistic, perhaps victims of an ancient curse, frozen by some unknown energy. Others speculated about a civilization lost to time, one that had mastered a technology or understanding of matter that we can no longer comprehend. A few fringe thinkers suggested they were not human at all, but warning markers like tombstones, not for the dead, but for something sealed away beneath the ice. In 2017, an independent filmmaker attempted to document the forest. His footage was never released, but fragments leaked online, distorted audio, flickers of movement, a glimpse of a new statue partially submerged in an iced-over lake. The most haunting frame showed a hand smooth and gray pressing against the inside of the ice as though from below. The Russian government now lists the area as restricted due to environmental hazards, but satellite images show a growing circle of dead forest expanding outward year after year. Some say the frozen faces are multiplying. Others believe the land is remembering. No university officially funds research into the region anymore. Those who've attempted to return often fall mysteriously ill or abandon the journey altogether. One elder, when shown a photo of the statues, simply said, "They're the ones who waited too long. Tonight, as you close your eyes, picture that forest still cold and silent. Picture those faces staring upward, forever caught between life and stone. And ask yourself, what did they see before they turned to stone?" Sleep well if you can. The Chamber of Whispering Bones. In a remote section of the Carpathian Mountains, not far from the mist-trapped woods that birthed centuries of superstition, there lies a cave so old and untouched that even local maps avoid its mention. For decades, perhaps centuries, The people of a neighboring village spoke of the place only in passing, never by name. It was to them a place you didn't seek out, not because of monsters or demons, but because the air around it didn't feel right. The dogs wouldn't go near. Compasses spawn. Even birds seemed to avoid flying above. In 2009, a team of climate researchers working on soil erosion surveys stumbled across what appeared to be a narrow opening along a weather-worn limestone cliff. It looked like nothing, just a crack, barely wide enough for a person to squeeze through. But something about the shape of the rocks and the faint draft of warm air from within led one of them, a Romanian archaeologist named Anna Muraru, to push forward. She had no idea what she was about to find. She would never fully recover from what she saw. The cave was deeper than expected, far deeper. After crawling through the opening, Anna and two other team members entered a long tunnel, its walls smooth and strangely dry. As they moved further inside, their footsteps echoed unnaturally, bouncing back, not as footsteps, but as layered sounds like murmurs coming from just behind them. They joked at first, as humans do when something unsettles them, laughed nervously. But then they reached the chamber. A wide circular room opened before them, carved not by water or erosion, but by tools. Tools used with great precision. The chamber's walls were covered in carvings, none of which matched any known language. Symbols, repeated across every surface, swirls, vertical lines, concentric circles, all in meticulous patterns. In the center of the room stood a stone platform, and surrounding it were human remains. Hundreds of them. But these weren't just piles of bones. Each skeleton had been placed deliberately, kneeling, sitting with arms crossed. Some positioned as if mid-con conversation with another, their heads tilted toward each other. Others had their hands covering their mouths or their ears as if trying to block something out, as if they had died listening to something unbearable. And at the center of it all, on that stone dais, was a figure unlike the others. A body mummified by the cave's dry conditions, wearing a mask fashioned from obsidian and what appeared to be crystal. The mask was fused to the skull. The mouth had been wired shut with copper filaments. In its lap was a stone tablet with symbols that to this day remain undeciphered. Anna later described the moment she stepped closer to the dais. She said her vision began to blur, not from fear or tears, but like the air itself was vibrating. Her ears rang, and then she said she heard something, a voice, not a whisper, but something like a breath on her skin forming words she couldn't translate, but felt she understood. Grief, regret, warning. They recorded everything, photographs, audio, even soil samples. But the data was off. Radiation levels spiked inside the chamber despite no logical source. The audio recordings, when played back, contained frequencies not heard during the expedition. In some of them, you could make out what sounded like voices, layers and layers of voices, whispering, chanting, sometimes crying. Anna began to have dreams, vivid ones, not of monsters or shadows, but of the people in the chamber sitting, waiting. She said she could feel what they felt. The despair, the urgency, the sense that they had gathered not to worship, but to contain something that spoke through stone and memory. Within weeks of returning, 3 team members left their research posts. One refused to speak about the experience ever again. Another disappeared entirely. Anna stayed silent for a year before publishing a brief paper, stripped of emotion, stating only what they found. Human remains, undated artifacts, and an unexplainable chamber of unknown origin. But privately, Anna kept a journal. She described how the whispers sometimes returned late at night, how she would wake up with dirt under her fingernails. Once she found herself outside barefoot in the snow, clutching a small stone shard with the same carvings from a chamber. She had no memory of how she got there. In 2013, a second expedition was planned but never carried out. One of the funders pulled support after receiving an anonymous package, a single photograph of the disc taken from an angle no one on the team had ever used. In the photo, the mummified figure's head was tilted as if it had turned to face the camera. Today, The location of the chamber remains hidden. Anna never disclosed the exact coordinates. She passed away in 2021, leaving behind her journal. Its final page reads, "It wasn't a tomb. It was a prison. And the dead, they were the ones guarding it. As you close your eyes tonight, imagine standing in that chamber. The still air, the dust floating like memories, the sound not from your ears, but from somewhere deeper, urging you to listen just once, just a little closer. The forgotten cavern beneath the Black Pyramid, in the heart of the Nubian desert, where the wind stings like sandpaper and silence stretches for miles, a black stone. Pyramid rests beneath the open sky. Most people never hear about this place. Tourists flock to the towering monuments of Giza. But far to the south, near the ruins of Maro, lies a site far less visited and possibly far stranger. This particular pyramid, smaller, darker, built from deep sandstone that absorbs the sun's heat, once belonged to a forgotten queen. Her name, translated loosely, means she who commands the night. Her tomb was discovered more than a century ago. Yet something about it continues to trouble the researchers who work there, not because of what they found, but because of what they couldn't explain. The pyramid itself isn't the mystery. It's what lies beneath it. During excavations in the early 1900s, archaeologists noted that the floor of the Queen's burial chamber sounded hollow, a faint echo, dull but persistent. When they walked across the sandstone slabs, they assumed it was just the natural layering of rock, or perhaps a fault in the construction. Then a storm came. Lightning cracked open part of the desert floor near the southern edge of the pyramid, and a slab shifted, revealing a cavity, not a tomb, not a chamber, a tunnel, descending into darkness. The British team at the time, cautious but intrigued, cleared the debris and lowered a rope ladder into the opening. What they found below was unlike anything they had seen in Egypt or Nubia. This was not a burial passage. It was a cavern. Smooth walls curved as if shaped by flowing water. Strange mineral deposits that shimmered faintly, even without light. Symbols carved into the stone, unlike hieroglyphs, but rhythmic in their spacing, almost like a script, a language, but not one anyone recognized. Some of the team believed it was a natural formation that had been used by the Queen's priests for rituals. Others weren't so sure. The precision of the carvings, the absence of any signs of water erosion, the total silence within the chamber. It didn't feel natural. It felt designed. They explored deeper, noting strange anomalies. Compasses spun, torches dimmed the air. Itself seemed thicker, not just with dust or heat, but with something else, a heaviness. Some said it was imagination, a trick of the darkness. But others on the team began experiencing something more tangible. One man claimed to hear voices, not loud, but like whispers echoing up from the stone. Another collapsed, convinced he had been touched by something cold. A third refused to descend at all after his boots began to slip as if pulled forward, though the floor was dry and level. Reports from this part of the expedition were left vague in official records, but letters recovered decades later, written by members of the dig team to family in Europe, paint a stranger picture. One called the chamber, a place we were not meant to find. Another described dreams of a black sun pulsing at the center of a stone maze. Whatever was down there, it affected them deeply. The dig was shut down without explanation. Sealed. The official line was instability in the cavern ceiling. Danger of collapse. The government issued an order to block access, and the pyramid fell silent again. For over 100 years, no official excavation returned. But that wasn't the end. In 1994, a group of researchers from Sudan, along with a few archaeologists from Europe, attempted to revisit the site. By then, erosion had begun to wear away the sandstone again. They were able to locate the sealed entrance and found it already open. Not recently, not by looters. The stonework used to seal, it was ancient, matching the same techniques used in the Old Kingdom, long before the pyramid was supposedly built. It was as if the tunnel had been sealed not once, but twice. Once in modern history, and once long before any of us knew it existed. That changes things. Why would a tunnel beneath a queen's tomb have been sealed thousands of years before her burial? And more importantly, who sealed it? The 1994 team didn't descend. Reports say they took readings, temperature, magnetism, humidity, but didn't go further. The instruments registered sharp anomalies, the kind usually associated with massive mineral deposits or electric fields, but no one could explain how those readings came from solid rock. Then came the dreams. Just like the team in 1903, the newer researchers began to report strange effects. A researcher from Paris described waking in a cold sweat, unable to breathe, seeing flickering lights in her closed eyelids. Another from Khartoum said he began sleepwalking each night, always facing the same direction toward the pyramid. They left soon after. No one has officially entered the tunnel since, and yet, satellite scans from the 2010s show something buried beneath the site. Something geometric, not natural, not cave systems or mineral veins, but intersecting corridors, spiral patterns like the inside of a machine. What kind of machine could be built under a pyramid? Who would build it? Some suggest it could be a lost temple older than the pyramid itself, perhaps even part of an earlier civilization that predates written history. Others suggest it may be connected to the idea of resonant chambers, structures designed to amplify sound or vibration. A few even claim the entire structure was built to contain something, not treasure, something else. Some ancient texts, scraps found in monasteries or tombs far from this site, refer to a place in the desert where the sky hums beneath the ground, a temple that was buried to silence its voice. Most scholars dismiss these as poetry. But when you hear the details of this pyramid, the phrasing begins to feel more literal. What if this place was never meant to be found? What if it was? Sealed not to protect it from the world, but to protect the world from it? The Black Pyramid still stands. Visitors walk past it without knowing what lies beneath. Tour guides rarely mention the tunnel. The official records say it was sealed for safety, but every now and then, someone posts a strange photograph online. A shimmer in the air, a shadow too long to be human, or a faint sound in a video clip, like stone grinding slowly deep below the sand. You won't find this story in textbooks. But if you ask the local guides quietly, some will tell you it's cursed ground. Others will just say the queen was not the first buried there, and perhaps not the last. The island that appeared then vanished. In the summer of 1831, sailors in the Mediterranean Sea watched something rise from the deep. They were aboard ships from different nations, British, Sicilian, French, and at first none of them could believe what they were seeing. A plume of steam had begun rising from the waves miles off the coast of Sicily. And over the course of a few days, the sea itself seemed to swell upward as if the ocean floor was being pushed toward the sky. Then the smoke turned to flame. Black rocks burst from the surface. Boiling water surrounded the area, and in the chaos of steam and fire, something solid began to emerge. An island. The sailors were witnessing the birth of land, a brand new island erupting into the world from under the sea. It was jagged, raw, smoldering, completely alien against the blue Mediterranean waters. News spread quickly. A British ship mapped the coordinates and raised its flag, claiming the island for the crown. The French followed, as did the Neapolitans and the Spanish. Within days, the tiny patch of volcanic rock became the subject of a strange geopolitical standoff. For nations, all laying claim to a rocky newborn just a few kilometers wide. They called it Ferdinandia. But the island would not last. Weeks passed. The lava cooled. The smoke cleared. But something was wrong. The surface was eroding faster than expected. Storms battered it. Waves began to swallow its edges. And one morning, before any nation could properly build on it, Ferdinandia was gone, swallowed by the sea. All that remained was a shallow reef beneath the surface. Still volcanic, still alive, but no longer visible to the human eye. The world moved on. But not everyone forgot. Over the years, whispers of other phantom islands began to surface. Places like Ferdinandia, lands that had been charted, mapped, even visited, and then vanished. Some were chalked up to volcanic activity. Others were blamed on poor navigation. A few were never explained at all. And that's where the mystery deepens. Ferdinandia is not the only island to disappear. It's just the most well-documented. But what if there were others hidden beneath layers of silt or drowned beneath rising seas? Or worse, what if some of them were never natural to begin with? Let's go back even further. There's a record from 1508. A sailor named Juan de Acosta, who had once sailed with Columbus, marked an island on a map just west of the Azores. The island was called Antilia, and he swore it was real. Many believed it, too. It appeared on maps for nearly 200 years. Then nothing. No one ever found it again. Centuries later, some suggested that perhaps Antilia had been a misreading, a myth, a mirage. But old nautical logs still exist. Journals from captains who insisted they saw land, stepped on it, even camped there briefly before leaving and never being able to return. These aren't fairy tales. These are historical records written by sober men trained in navigation. And yet they all describe places that simply no longer exist. Why? Some scientists argue these are simply volcanic seam mounts, underwater volcanoes that occasionally rise above the surface before subsiding again. Others suggest they were sandbars temporarily raised by unusual tectonic movements or sea currents. But there's another school of thought, one that drifts into more uncharted territory. Some researchers, not mainstream ones, but respected in their own fields, have started to question whether our maps are truly complete. Not just now, but historically, they suggest that ancient civilizations may have recorded coastlines and islands that no longer exist. Not due to volcanoes, but due to something even more complex, land subsidence. Massive portions of the Earth's crust slowly sinking over time. Take the case of Doggerland, for instance. It once connected the British Isles to mainland Europe, a vast, fertile land teeming with human life. Then sometime around 8,000 years ago, it began to flood bit by bit, inch by inch, until nothing was left but the North Sea. We only know of Doggerland's existence today because of underwater surveys and ancient tools discovered by fishermen. Otherwise, we would never have known there was once a lost land beneath the waves. So, how many other lands have we missed? How many islands like Ferdinandia existed for just a moment in geological time, too short to become part of history, but long enough to be remembered in legend? There are stories from the Pacific of islands that fishermen remember visiting as children only to find nothing when they return as adults. Some of these stories come from multiple generations. They speak of lands with strange rock formations, unusual wildlife, even ruins, old stone walls buried in jungle, or circular depressions like the remains of ancient structures, and always gone without a trace. In 2020, satellite surveys discovered a tiny volcanic peak in the Pacific that had risen and fallen 3 times in the last century. It wasn't on most maps, and no one had ever landed there, but it had emerged and disappeared, which raises a deeper question. What if not all of these disappearing islands are geological? What if some of them are something else entirely? A few fringe theorists have suggested that some so-called phantom islands could be the result of artificial interference, not modern interference, but ancient structures or platforms built long ago, either by humans or, as some cautiously whisper, by civilizations unknown. Of course, there's no proof of this, but there's something undeniably strange about how often these reports appear in naval archives. Sailors aren't easily fooled. They rely on precision. They rely on the stars, and they stake their survival on knowing where land is and where it isn't. So when dozens of accounts across centuries say, "We saw something, we stepped onto it, and now it's gone," you start to wonder, could it be that our oceans still hold secrets far beyond what we've mapped? That there are places the Earth reveals only briefly before reclaiming them? Or that perhaps, just perhaps, we've been glimpsing the remnants of something far older, something trying to stay hidden? Ferdinand was real. That much is certain. And if one island could emerge, ignite a diplomatic scramble, and then vanish without a trace, then how many others have come and gone without any record at all? Perhaps the ocean has memories it doesn't share easily. And perhaps in those quiet depths, more islands wait to rise again, if only for a moment. The sealed tablet of Ugarit. In the ruins of Ras Shamra on the northern coast of modern-day Syria, archaeologists in the 1920s uncovered the long-lost city of Ugarit, a thriving Bronze Age port once bustling with life, trade, and extraordinary written knowledge. Ugarit is famous for giving the world one of the earliest known alphabets. But among the thousands of cuneiform tablets uncovered in the ruins of palace libraries and temples, there was one tablet that stood apart, one that no one could read. It wasn't made of clay like the others. It wasn't written in Ugaritic, Adian, or Sumerian, and it wasn't even discovered in a building. It was sealed inside a smooth limestone block buried beneath the floor of a collapsed storeroom, wrapped in thick layers of bitumen and linen as if it had been hidden in extreme urgency. The archaeologist who found it, Francois Dessay, described the moment as deeply unsettling. He said the room was colder than the others, that when they cracked open the block and touched the tablet inside, everyone went quiet, not in awe, in unease. The tablet was about the size of a book, smooth and dark, made from a material unlike any of the other relics, a mixture of crushed hematite and volcanic glass that hadn't been sourced anywhere nearby. It was warm to the touch despite lying underground for over 3,000 years. But it was the markings that puzzled researchers most. Not a known language, not pictographs, not decorative. Etched into the surface were deep grooves, not carved like words, but patterned like a waveform, a continuous, looping spiral interrupted only by 6 symbols spaced unevenly along its curve. It didn't translate into anything. Yet, Desert brought the tablet to Europe for deeper study, but strange things followed. The document went missing twice from archives, only to reappear misfiled months later. A technician who handled its scan reported vivid, recurring dreams of drowning in black sand. A translator from Beirut claimed the waveform resembled sound frequencies and ran the tablet through audio conversion software. What came out was not music, not a voice, but a pulse, a soft, layered rhythm that built in intensity and then dropped into silence. When slowed down and amplified, the sound resembled a human inhale, but reversed. Theories began to form. Some claimed the tablet was a recording, not of sound, but of memory. Others believed it was a warning encoded in a format not meant to be read, but felt, a language written in pressure, time, and energy, something that couldn't be deciphered by logic alone. One researcher from Damascus, who studied the symbols extensively, published a single paper suggesting the symbols matched the positions of certain celestial bodies, not constellations, but specific planetary alignments that had only occurred once in recorded human history. Around 1180 BCE, the exact Yerite mysteriously vanished. Not in war, not in fire, but in silence. There were no signs of mass destruction in the ruins. Houses were abandoned mid-meal. No bodies, no weapons, just a perfectly normal city, frozen in the moment, as if its people simply disappeared. Years later, when restoration efforts resumed at Ras Shamra, a second sealed chamber was found below a collapsed altar. Inside it was a stone bowl filled with hardened resin, and placed at its base, a single obsidian shard etched with the same spiral waveform. This time, the audio produced a different result. Still a pulse, but faster, a warning rhythm, and again the reverse breath. Today, the two artifacts are kept in separate vaults in France and Syria. Access is tightly controlled, but unofficially technicians still speak of the effect it has when played in full dizziness, sudden nausea, and in a few cases fainting. One audio engineer reported hearing whispering when he slowed the waveform by a factor of 10. Not in Arabic, not Ujidic, but something deeper, broken, like voices caught between layers of static. There's a theory only whispered among fringe scholars that the tablets weren't made for humans, that they were sealed not to protect them, but to protect us, that whatever Ugaritic discovered, buried it, locked it, and fled. And now, in digital age curiosity, we've opened it again. The waveform spiral has since been found in 2 other locations. once carved into stone in Malta and again faintly etched into the walls of a tomb beneath the Andes. No one knows how they're connected. No one knows who made them, but each one, when scanned, gives off the same frequency that reverse breath. And somewhere in the rhythm of it all, there's something waiting, not alive, not dead, but recorded, stored, maybe a message, maybe a memory, or maybe something that has been trying to return. The object that shouldn't exist. It was a quiet morning in October 2017 at the Hikala Observatory in Hawaii. Astronomers were going through their routine. They were scanning the skies for asteroids and comets, cataloging anything new that might pose a threat or offer insight into the solar system. Nothing unusual, nothing exciting, just data flickering across their screens. But then something appeared, something small, something fast, an object with a trajectory that didn't fit anything they had seen before. As they tracked it further, the numbers stopped making sense. The object wasn't orbiting the sun like everything else they usually observed. It wasn't looping back around or falling inward. It was passing through, and it was on its way out. They recalculated, verified, checked again, but the math stayed the same. This object had entered the solar system from beyond. It wasn't born here. It didn't belong. That realization settled like a chill in the room. They had just discovered something truly unprecedented. An interstellar object. The first ever detected. A visitor from another star system. They named it Oumuamua, a Hawaiian word that means scout or messenger from afar arriving first. It felt symbolic, mysterious, almost poetic, as if it were the first whisper from some far-off corner of the galaxy, passing silently through our neighborhood. What made Oumuamua so puzzling was more than just its origin. It was its shape. From the way its brightness changed, scientists concluded. It had an odd form, likely long and narrow like a cigar, or possibly flat like a pancake. And yet, they had no actual image of it, just a single speck tracked through telescopes. No detail, just light. Initially, it was classified as a comet, but something was missing. It didn't behave like any comet known. There was no visible tail, no outgassing, no halo of vapor or dust. Comets, when they approach the sun, release gas and dust as their icy surfaces warm up. This creates their signature glowing tails and, importantly, provides a small but measurable push like a little jet of force from the evaporation of materials. But Oumuamua wasn't doing that. No tail, no dust, no signs of sublimation. Yet something strange was happening. As it moved away from the sun, it began to speed up very slightly. Barely noticeable, but still measurable. An unexplained acceleration. According to physics, an object can only change its velocity if something pushes it. But there was nothing there. No jets, no engines, no outra assim, no. Gravitational slingshot, just this eerie, quiet drift that didn't follow the rules. So the question emerged, what was pushing Oumuamua? Various hypotheses were offered. Could it be a hydrogen iceberg sublimating in a way that was invisible to our instruments? Hydrogen is difficult to detect, but the idea had problems. Hydrogen icebergs are incredibly fragile and would likely evaporate long before reaching our solar system. Then came one of the most controversial ideas. Avi Loeb, a Harvard astrophysicist, proposed that Oumuamua might not be natural at all. He suggested it could be an alien artifact, specifically a light sail, an extremely thin engineered structure designed to catch radiation and use it as propulsion drifting silently through interstellar space. It was an extraordinary claim. Most scientists dismissed it, too speculative, no evidence. But Lowe stood by it. He argued that we shouldn't ignore a possible explanation simply because it's uncomfortable or unfamiliar. If we claim to be open to discovery, we must be open to all possibilities. Still, the mainstream view leaned toward natural causes. Many theorists believe that some form of exotic ice or internal hydrogen release could explain the push. One alternative came from a group of researchers who introduced the idea of dark comets, objects that do release gas, but not in ways our instruments could detect. No dust, no bright coma, just invisible gases being released from within the structure as it warms in sunlight. They suggested that under extreme cold, pockets of hydrogen or other gases might be trapped in the ice, only to be released when cosmic radiation rearranges the molecular structure. In this view, Oumuamua was not alone. It was simply the first of its kind that we noticed, and more might be out there. This led scientists to look again at the data. They started combing through observations of other small near-Earth asteroids, not interstellar ones, but local ones. And surprisingly, they found 6 more. 6 objects that behaved in ways similar to Oumuamua. Tiny, unremarkable, and yet somehow accelerating in ways that can't be explained by known forces. One of these, named 1998 KY26, is already scheduled for a visit. The Japanese Space Ice Hayabusa 2 spacecraft, which previously completed a mission to another asteroid, has been reassigned to explore this strange little object. The flyby is planned for 2031. 1998 KY26 is only 30 m across and rotates once every 10 minutes. From afar, it looks like a typical near-Earth asteroid, but something is off. A subtle deviation in its trajectory, a hint that something is pushing it that we don't yet understand. So maybe these objects are dark comets. Maybe they're slowly venting invisible gas. Or maybe something else is at work. What makes it so fascinating is that we're not just looking at one mystery anymore. We're looking at a pattern, a growing list of unexplained behaviors among small, fast-moving objects in space. If these objects all share the same hidden physics, then maybe we're on the verge of uncovering a new category of celestial bodies, ones that defy simple classification as comets or asteroids, something in between, something new. And if by chance one of them turns out to be artificial, then it would change everything. That's unlikely, but not impossible. We know so little about what drifts between stars. Interstellar space is vast, cold, and mostly empty. But if even one civilization out there sensed something, anything that passed close to us, how would we know? Will we even recognize it? Muon may have been the first of many, or it may have been a singular event, a cosmic coincidence, a random visitor never to be seen again. But it left behind questions, the kind that don't fade with time, the kind that haunt astronomers and stir imaginations. Why did it accelerate? Why no dust? Why that shape? And why now? We may never find out. It's too far away now, beyond Neptune, fainter than any telescope can see. All we have left is the data we collected during its brief appearance and the trail of new mysteries it left behind. But maybe, just maybe, the next time something like it visits, we'll be ready and we'll have answers, or more likely, even bigger questions. The skillfifs of Cerro Azul. In the barren highlands of coastal Peru, where the wind howls across salt-stained cliffs and sand-bleached ridges, there exists a site almost entirely erased by time. A series of gigantic geometric patterns carved not into the earth, but etched onto the exposed face of a mountain. They are not visible from the ground, from the valley floor. Cerro Azul looks like any other forgotten Andean peak. Wind-blown, weathered, empty, but when seen from the sky, especially just before sundown, something shifts. The jagged cliffs align into deliberate shapes, long triangles, eye-like ovals, and massive interlocking rings. For years, locals believed the shapes were natural shadows. Pilots in the 1930s flying cargo planes low through the mountain passes were the first to report the strange alignment. A few even suggested the mountain itself was a message, one too large and too inaccessible to have been created by the hands of any known civilization. It wasn't until 1986 when a team of geologists from Lima brought aerial photography equipment for mineral surveys that the mystery truly gained traction. When the photos were developed, analysts were stunned. Not only were the glyphs too symmetrical to be accidental, but they also spanned nearly 12 kilometers of exposed rock wrapping around the curves of the cliff like sculpted lines on an enormous forgotten canvas. Even more curious, the patterns only aligned when viewed from a very specific altitude and angle, as though they were meant to be seen from the air. This immediately sparked debates. Were they ceremonial, astronomical, or perhaps something else? A cultural anthropologist named Dr. Elise Benna began a multi-year expedition to map the glyphs. Her early findings were almost poetic. She described the sensation of standing below the glyphs as like walking beneath the fingers of something watching you from above. She noted the eerie lack of wildlife near the site. No birds roost on Sarah Azul's face. No rodents nested among its crevices. Not even lichen clung to its windward stone. It was as if life itself refused to touch the markings. Then came the whispers from nearby villagers. Old stories passed down quietly but consistently. They said Zero All was a mountain that breathes, a sacred space that was never meant to be climbed. Some even insisted that the mountain changes shape subtly year by year, as if it were alive. One story spoke of a traveler who once tried to scale the cliff only to return days later with no memory. Dried blood beneath his fingernails and a small stone clenched so tightly in his hand it had embedded into his skin. He never spoke again, and when he died months later, the stone was buried with him by request of the village elders. Dr. Benna, despite warnings, continued her work. Over time, her team noticed something unnerving. The glyphs, while massive and ancient, weren't static. New aerial photos taken in 1988 showed slight shifts, barely measurable, but undeniably present. What had once been a closed ring now showed a narrow break. A line extended a few meters farther down the ridge than before. No seismic activity had occurred, no rock slides, nothing that could explain the changes. When the team returned in person, they confirmed it. The glyphs were moving. One sleepless night, Dr. Benna recorded an audio diary. Her voice, cracked with exhaustion, spoke slowly. I thought these were just carvings, echoes of a forgotten people, but now I think we're being warned. Something is unfolding, something we weren't meant to see. The following year, the research ceased. Not because of lack of funding, but because of an accident. A graduate student on the team was found at the base of the cliff, his body unmarked, but completely lifeless, as though he had simply stopped being. No cause of death could be identified. The official report lists it as sudden cardiac failure. But his autopsy revealed something stranger. His brain had the patterns of long-term hypoxia, oxygen deprivation, as if he had suffocated slowly over days despite no signs of struggle or injury. Barra's final field note, written in a trembling hand, read, I've seen something in the rock. I'm not sure it was always there. Since then, Zero All has been mostly avoided. The Peruvian government quietly placed restrictions on flights in the area, citing turbulence concerns. But some researchers believe that what lies on that cliff is still evolving, that it's alive in some sense we don't yet understand. A message not just written in stone, but growing, reacting to our observation. Some call a signal. Others say it's a countdown. Whatever it is, the mountain still watches the skies, and it waits. The glass tablet of Lerna. In southern Greece, beyond the tourist paths, past the broken temples and busy islands, there's a land that doesn't show up on postcards. Olive trees rise and fall across the hills in soft waves. The ground is rocky but quiet. You can walk there for hours and hear nothing but cicadas and your own footsteps. That land is called Lerna. It looks ordinary, but it holds something entirely out of place. The ruins of Lerna have been known for a long time. Archaeologists call it one of the oldest known human settlements in Greece. Simple huts once stood there. Later, larger buildings appeared. One of them, the so-called House of Tiles, is thought to be an early form of palace, maybe even administrative. Bronze Age, over 4,000 years old. Most teams who come here dig for pottery shards or building stones, basic stuff. But in the summer of 1972, during one of these normal digs, they found something completely unexplainable. A glass tablet. But this wasn't ordinary glass. It wasn't broken. It wasn't melted sand. It was smooth, almost unnaturally. So the dig team found it by accident. One of the students, named Elias, was brushing soil from a stone foundation when his brush caught on a flat edge. He assumed it was just tile, maybe leftover roof debris. But as he cleaned more, it became clear this wasn't ceramic. It was clear, but not quite. It refracted light in strange ways, like a gemstone, but too large, too uniform. At first glance, it looked like some kind of embedded screen, like modern tech had somehow fallen back in time. But that was impossible. The soil layers around it dated back thousands of years. The tablet had been buried long before screens or circuits or cities as we know them. The team pulled it free and brought it to their field lab. It was the size of a thick book, rectangular, flat, and cool to the touch, even under the harsh Greek sun. And when you tilted it at the right angle, a shimmer moved through it. Violet green, like an aurora sealed in stone. Dr. Helen Marinos, who led the dig, couldn't explain it. None of the equipment they brought could scratch it, not even steel tools. The material didn't fog, didn't heat up, didn't reflect like glass, but it wasn't metal either. They tried everything. Nothing worked. Then the markings appeared. Microscopic, almost invisible, etched along the surface in delicate crisscrossing lines. Not symbols, not writing, just endless branching pathways, like veins or roots or the neural maps inside a brain. The lines weren't random. They followed specific geometric patterns, spirals, ratios, mirrored formations. When the team traced them on paper, the designs repeated with eerie precision, almost like musical harmonies rendered in shape. And that's when the dreams began. It started small. One of the assistants, a graduate student from Thessaloniki, said he was having vivid nightmares. Not scary exactly, but intense. He was seeing patterns in his sleep, feeling pressure, hearing pulses. Another student, Anna, said she felt something like internal gravity pulling her down when she looked at the tablet too long. Not dizziness, something deeper, a kind of memory that didn't belong to her. Dr. Marinos tried to keep things calm. She documented the experiences and asked her team to take regular breaks. But the experiences continued stronger now. One night, several people reported waking up at the same exact time, 3:17 a.m., after hearing what sounded like a low humming. But there were no machines on site, no electricity, no wind. In one of her notebook entries, Dr. from Marinos wrote, "This doesn't feel like archaeology anymore. It feels like we've brought something to the surface that doesn't want to be looked at. It's not dangerous, but it isn't asleep either." They tested the tablet's material in a nearby lab. That's when the real mystery unraveled. The sample wasn't natural. The silica was fused at a molecular level that would require temperatures higher than any ancient kiln, higher even than the heat generated in modern furnaces. There were no air bubbles, no impurities. The internal molecular alignment was so precise it behaved like engineered crystal. It wasn't glass. It was something far beyond it. And its date, based on soil stratigraphy and radiocarbon testing of surrounding materials, it had been buried for over 4,000 years. The researchers stopped sleeping properly, but they didn't leave. They were drawn to it, curious, anxious, obsessed. One man, a quiet researcher named Theo, became completely entranced. He stared at the tablet for hours, saying nothing. He began writing equations in the margins of his journal, formulas involving spatial compression, gravitational harmonics, astronomical alignments. No one knew what he was trying to prove. His last entry said, "It's not a message. It's a mirror." Then he vanished. One morning, his tent was empty. No sign of struggle. His clothes, boots, everything still there except the tablet. For 2 years, it disappeared. No police report, no press coverage, only whispers within the academic community. Some said Theo had taken it and buried it again, afraid of what it might do. Others thought he had found a way to activate it, whatever that meant. Then in 1974, the tablet resurfaced quietly. No announcement, just a cardboard box left at the Athens National Museum. Inside, the object was intact, cold as ever. But something had changed. It was darker, duller. The shimmer inside had gone. The museum kept it locked away. No display, no papers. The government placed it under a research ban until further notice. Some say it was because of national security. Others believe something happened that wasn't meant for public understanding. But a few researchers kept copies of the line patterns. They compared them to satellite images, to magnetic field maps, and to ancient cave drawings from thousands of miles away. Some of the patterns matched, not identically, but close. Too close to ignore. It was as if someone or something had tried to map not just land or stars, but events, patterns in time, as though the tablet was a kind of memory preserved in geometry, not just what had happened, but what could happen. One professor proposed it was a time capsule, not of objects, but of logic, of thought itself. He believed the markings were emotional patterns encoded in pressure, the way a mind might store information if it had no words. Others dismissed it all. They said it was pareidolia, pattern recognition gone wild. People seeing, meaning where none existed. But those who had held the tablet, who had touched its surface and felt the strange pressure, they disagreed. One woman who had only seen the tablet once in person developed an obsession with symmetry. She painted spirals and grids every day for a year before giving up speech entirely. Another, an intern from Britain, spent the next decade mapping fault lines and claimed the tablet had shown a break that hadn't happened yet. In 1999, that exact fault cracked open. Coincidence? Maybe. But to this day, the glass tablet of Lerna sits hidden in a private archive, unstudied, unpublicized. Only a few grainy photographs exist. The official records listed as artificial silicate of unknown purpose. But the ones who've seen it say it's not artificial. They say it's deliberate, as if someone long before us knew how to leave behind a thought, not in symbols, not in stories, but in structure, something you can only understand by feeling it. Not with your fingers, not even your mind, but somewhere deeper. And maybe that's what disturbed the team. Not because it was dangerous, not because it was alien, but because it was familiar, as if it had always been there, waiting to be remembered. The forgotten machines of Angira. In the quiet valleys of northern Argentina, far from the Andean peaks and modern roads, lies a place called Angira. The land rolls gently here. Soft hills, carved red sandstone cliffs, and winding creeks that vanish in the dry season. To most, it looks empty, peaceful. But for generations, the locals have warned visitors not to stay after dark. Not because of wildlife or bandits, because of the sounds. Even now, when the wind dies down and the crickets pause, strange clicking noises echo across the rocks. Not rhythmic like insects, not natural like water, but something in between. Some say it sounds like gears turning slowly. Others say it's like breath, metallic breath from under the ground. No one knows exactly when the stories began. The area has always been remote, but oral traditions of the Kamachan people, an indigenous culture, erased by colonization, speak of underground fire, moving stone, and things that built themselves. Some dismissed these tales as metaphor. But then in 1949, everything changed. That year, a small team of hydrologists visited Angira to study water flow under the hills. Their instruments picked up something strange. Anomalies in the rock, cavities where none should be, metallic interference underground. Thinking it might be old mining activity, they drilled a narrow shaft into one of the cliffs. And what they found didn't belong to any known era. Roughly 3 m below the surface, the drill bit struck something hard. Not stone, not ore, but forged alloy, metal that resisted pressure and heat. When they cleared the shaft and sent a probe down, the camera showed something no one expected. Machinery, old, dusted over, but unmistakably mechanical. Pipes, frames, wheels, many of them seized in place by time, but still intact, not broken, not collapsed, built into the stone, as if the mountain had grown around them. Yet the strangest part wasn't what they saw, but what they heard. A low hum. Even with all systems off, with no electrical connection, the prob's mic recorded vibrations, soft, continuous, unnatural. The hum wasn't coming from machines. It was coming from the rock itself, as if the mountain were resonating with some forgotten frequency. The team documented their findings and returned home. But something went wrong. One of the engineers, a man named Alfredo, never came back. The others said he had insisted on going back into the shaft. One last time alone. He took a flashlight, a recorder, and a notepad. Only the notepad was ever found. Its last page simply read, It's not broken. It's waiting. The Argentine government quietly restricted access to Onamira after that. Officially, they claimed erosion risks and archaeological protection zones, but no further digs were allowed. For years, the area was forgotten again until 19. A landslide exposed a sidewall of one of the cliffs. Locals discovered more machinery. Not just pipes or wheels, but entire panels, embedded into the rock. Smooth, rustless surfaces with branching patterns, almost like circuit boards, but thicker, stronger, impossible to date. A geologist who analyzed one panel found that the surrounding rock was over 9 million years old. That fact alone should have ended the discussion. Machines inside rock, that ancient. It didn't make sense. No civilization we know of existed even close to that time. Some claimed the machinery was a natural formation, that it only looked man-made, but others disagreed, especially those who saw the symbols. Carved faintly along the metallic surfaces were rows of repeated markings, three-sided triangles, spirals, and concentric circles. No known script, but strangely ordered, as if they were instructions or warnings. One linguist who studied the shapes compared them to ancient quipunats from Peru. Another saw similarities to sound wave harmonics in Aboriginal songlines, but there was no consensus, just growing unease and more sounds. The deeper you went into the valley, the clearer the clicking became, sometimes mechanical, sometimes organic, always timed, as if something old was still trying to function, still shifting beneath the stone. In 1993, a research group managed to sneak in without permits. They recorded audio for 48 hours straight. The files were later analyzed by sound engineers in Buenos Aires. What they found shocked them. The audio spectrum wasn't random. It contained modulation layers, as if someone or something was transmitting encoded information in a loop, repeated every 11 minutes and 43 seconds. The team never published their findings. One member moved to Canada and refused to speak about the trip again. Another left academia entirely, but the recordings remain leaked in fragments online. To most ears, they sound like static, but when you slow it down, way down, it begins to resemble something else. Speech, but not human. Not language in the way we know it. More like emotional tone rendered in vibration. Sadness, curiosity, anger, memory, grief. The machines weren't trying to talk. They were remembering something. From before the soil, before the trees, before the people. One local shepherd claims he saw a panel light up once dimly, like the last breath of a fire. He says he didn't tell anyone for years, afraid no one would believe him. But when asked what it looked like, he paused and said it was showing me, but not me now. Me before whatever was found in Ngamera, whoever built it. It wasn't meant for destruction. It wasn't even meant for us. The site remains closed today, but the clicking hasn't stopped. And more machines have been found embedded in cliffs miles away, too similar to ignore. Maybe Ngamera was a cradle. Maybe it was a factory. Or maybe it was a memory vault left by something that didn't want to be forgotten even after millions of years. But the question isn't just who built them. The question is, what were they waiting for? The black glass of Puo. In the deep forests of southern Chile, nestled near the slopes of the dormant Puo volcano, lies a strange, forgotten zone of land. It is neither fully forest, nor fully plain, not quite wild, not quite touched. And yet here beneath the mossy earth lies something that has puzzled scientists for over 5 decades. A layer of pitch-black mirror-like glass stretching for nearly a square kilometer. It was discovered in 1972 during a geological survey after a series of mild tremors. The earth had cracked open in a shallow ravine, revealing what looked like obsidian. But this wasn't volcanic glass in the normal sense. This material was far too pure, almost perfect in clarity when broken. Like industrial-grade crystal, but completely black and strangely warm to the touch. Samples were taken, tested, and dismissed quietly. But one sample studied secretly at the University de Chile showed something that shook the research team. The molecular structure of the glass was altered in a way no known natural process could explain. The alignment was too orderly, almost engineered. The next expedition arrived in 1974, accompanied by archaeologists, not just geologists. Underneath the layer of black glass, they found what looked like flattened stone pillars, burned, shattered, some fused directly into the glass layer itself, and scattered around them, buried deeper than expected, were carved items, fragments of tools, rings, and something resembling a dial or calendar. One disc unearthed just 80 centimeters below the glass bore symbols no one could identify. Not Mayan, not Incan, not Mapuche. The patterns looked like overlapping spirals intercut by straight lines, almost like an aerial circuit diagram. Experts were baffled. It didn't match any known ancient culture. But the most disturbing artifact came from further down. A partial human jawbone fused into the edge of the black glass, cleanly, as if it had been instantly sealed during some event. Perhaps a blast, but without any signs of combustion around it. Theories swirled. Had an ancient meteor exploded here? Was it a volcanic eruption unlike any other? But there was no crater, no ash layer, no surrounding tree damage. And more strange still, the glass was beneath the root systems of some trees that were over 300 years old. This wasn't a recent event. Even the local Mapuche elders, when told of the discovery, refused to go near it. They spoke in hushed tones about a forbidden zone their ancestors called Trefonkin, meaning the lake that was fire but never burned. According to their stories, their forebears saw the sky rip open one night generations ago, and fire rained silently. But there was no smoke, no heat, just light that turned the ground to mirror. One elder, nearly blind and in his 90s, was shown a small shard of the black glass. He held it, turned it in his hands, and whispered, "It remembers." What did he mean by that? Well, a few researchers who stayed longer near the site began reporting hallucinations. At first, just flashes of light, then full waking dreams. One claimed she saw a city made of stone, but shining illuminated from within. The people there wore robes of woven metal threads and carried glass rods that pulsed with color. Another heard music, long drawn-out tones like whale song echoing through the rocks beneath the earth. But perhaps the most terrifying report came from a surveyor in 1980. He had been mapping the edges of the glass layer when he stepped on a soft patch and fell through a hole only a meter deep. When his team pulled him out, he was shaking pale. All he could say for the next 6 hours was, "It's underneath." It's not done. Since then, the Chilean government has quietly placed a no-access restriction on the area, citing ground instability. But local pilots flying overhead claim to have seen new shapes forming in the forest. Circular patterns, evenly spaced trees dying in rings, and glints of black just below the canopy that shouldn't be there. Some believe the glass is part of a buried machine or a vessel long dormant. Others suggest it was a testing ground, either for an ancient lost civilization or something not of this world. The material to this day cannot be replicated and resists all conventional dating methods. It seems to exist out of time, but the land remembers. It is silent, still watching. And those who have walked across that smooth, dark glass just once say the air feels thicker, like something is pressing up from beneath, waiting to return. Not in fire, not in light, but in memory. The spiral signal of Aerocom. Beneath the scorched and shifting sands of the Aerocom Desert, a land that was once the seabed of the Aral Sea, there exists a formation so strange that satellite analysts at first mistook it for a glitch. Seen only from above, it's a massive, precise spiral pattern etched faintly into the earth, its coils stretching over a kilometer in diameter, but on the ground, it's nearly invisible. To the naked eye, it's just dust, pebbles, and blistering wind. This pattern remained unknown to the world until 2003, when a declassified satellite scan of the region revealed its shape. No local folklore mentioned it. No ancient maps marked it. And yet, when researchers visited the coordinates, they found something more unsettling than geometry in the sand. At the spiral center stood a narrow, tapering pillar, stone-like, but metallic beneath its weathered surface. Barely a meter tall, it pulsed faintly with warmth, despite being exposed to freezing desert nights. Buried around it in shallow pits were peculiar objects, rings of copper alloy, interlocked spheres that spun when disturbed, and sheets of something like missica inscribed with long flowing lines like cursive writing, but with no known symbols. The dig was led by an independent research group from Kazakhstan, and they quickly noticed something odd. Every compass near the site spun erratically. GPS signals glitched. Batteries drained faster than normal. Even mechanical watches lost time. Some sped up, others froze entirely. Then came the noise. At exactly 3:18 a.m. on their third night, a low hum began. It wasn't wind. It wasn't mechanical. It came from underground. Soft at first, then louder like a pulse or chant. All recording equipment captured the same pattern, a deep, resonating frequency at 171 hertz, just above the human threshold for perception. The team described it as standing inside a living machine. After 17 minutes, it stopped. They thought it was over until they looked at the spiral again the next morning. It had shifted, not drastically, but enough. Some coils had changed position. New depressions in the ground had formed, each perfectly circular, about the size of a human skull. The researchers marked them, took measurements. When they returned the following week, more had appeared, always in patterns, always during the night. Some began to speculate the desert wasn't holding a site. It was the site. The entire spiral might be one massive mechanism buried beneath centuries of sand. Then they found the lens polished like glass, but with a surface that shimmered like oil. It was buried 12 m deep and shaped like a convex mirror. When held up to the sky, it refracted the sun strangely, splitting it into not just colors but patterns. Swirling symbols appeared inside the light halo, rotating slowly before fading. And when it was pointed toward the moon, the spiral hummed. Again, this time it didn't stop after 17 minutes. It pulsed all night. The crew abandoned the site at dawn, terrified. One member reported vivid dreams for weeks of floating cities, endless sand, and a language spoken through tones rather than words. Another developed a phobia of spirals. A third left archaeology altogether, but the desert remained quiet afterward for a time. In 2015, a team tried to replicate the discovery. They were met with a sandstorm that arrived without warning. Equipment shorted out. One drone captured a frame, just one, of something emerging from the sand near the central pillar. A shape, tall, angular, almost humanoid, but with limbs bent at impossible angles. The file was corrupted, but the single still image survived. The spiral now grows faint again. It shifts with time, eroded and reborn by the winds, but satellite scans still show changes, expansions, new rings appearing where none were before. Some theorists believe the spiral was a signal broadcast into the stars long ago. Others think it's a lock, or worse, a countdown. No one can explain how ancient people, if it was even people, could have engineered such precision across such scale. There are no local tools, no evidence of nearby settlements, no signs of habitation, just glass, copper, resonance, and the sand and the hum. If you stood there now in the absolute silence of Aerocom, you might hear nothing, feel nothing, but beneath your feet, something waits. Not asleep, not dead, just listening to the sky, to us. The clock that shouldn't exist. In a forgotten canyon near the borders of modern-day Kazakhstan, shepherds once found something that looked like it had no business being there. It wasn't a ruin. It wasn't bones. It was metal, old metal, blackened, oddly warm to the touch, and shaped into a form no one could quite understand. At the center of this strange piece lay a wheel, notched like a gear, silent, cold, and impossibly still ticking. The villagers had no word for it. To them, it was the silent heart, buried halfway into the ground, revealed only after a violent landslide. Exposed its upper rim in the 1960s. For weeks, no one approached it. They said birds wouldn't fly near. Herds refused to graze around it. Even the air seemed to hum slightly differently there. Eventually, word spread. A local geologist, Dimitri Coralino, led a team to study the object. What they found was indescribable. The mechanism was embedded into solid rock estimated to be over 10 million years old. That alone should have been impossible. Machines, as we know them, are barely a few thousand years old. And yet here it was, sealed into the earth before humanity had even tamed fire. The team excavated slowly, carefully. What emerged was no larger than a dining table made of interlocking rings, crystalline rods, and a spiral of etched copper that wound inward like a maze. Some parts were fused, some separate, but all of it was seamless, not bolted, not welded. It was like the entire machine had been grown. When touched, one of the rods began to vibrate gently. It gave off a frequency that made fillings ache in watches. Stop. One assistant claimed it made her dream vividly at night. Dreams of strange skies and machines growing from soil like plants. Others said the mechanism whispered, not in words, but in a pattern like a memory that wanted to be remembered. Nitri published a single paper. It was dismissed by peers as science fiction. He went silent afterward, never speaking publicly about the machine again. In private journals found after his death, he'd written a single repeated sentence. We were never the first, we're just the next. But the most unsettling part, the mechanism was still working. Not functioning in any way we understand, but operating. The gear still ticked once every 11 minutes with the precision of a modern atomic clock. It made no sound, but the tick was measurable, registering faint pulses through seismic sensors. Something somewhere was still winding it. Years later, satellite imagery showed something chilling. The machine aligned perfectly with two others. Unknown sites still buried beneath the ground in Iran and Mongolia, forming a triangle so precise it could only be intentional. The implication was clear. There were more machines. Governments blocked access. The canyon was declared unstable, restricted for public safety, and slowly the machine faded from public record. But there are still locals who say it pulses louder during full moons. That during snowstorms you can see steam rising faintly from it, though it never melts the ice. Some claim to hear rhythmic humming from deep underground when they lie close to the earth near the site. Others say the machine doesn't. Count time forward, but backwards. And if that's true, what happens when it reaches zero? No one knows who built it or why. No texts mention it. No legends reference it. It doesn't belong to any known people, any known era, or any known purpose. Yet it exists. And sometimes that's the most terrifying mystery of all. The mirror that sees without light. Tucked away in the secure vaults of a small private museum in southern Ecuador lies an artifact that should not exist. Not because it's old. Many artifacts are. And not because it's rare, though it is, but because it behaves in ways no object ever should. It's called Lisp Negro, the Black Mirror. To the naked eye, it appears to be a slab of dark obsidian, perfectly flat and circular, about the size of a dinner plate. But it's what happens when you stare into it that makes it unforgettable and deeply unsettling. The mirror was first discovered in 1956 during a mining survey in a cave system near Cuenca. It was wrapped in thick leather, buried beside no bones, no treasure, and no known cultural markings, just lying there in the dark as though it had been waiting. The obsidian, once unwrapped, had a sheen so perfect that it reflected not your face, but your outline, distorted, like you were looking at a memory of yourself or someone trying to imitate you. Researchers at first dismissed it as a ritual item, but when one archaeologist kept the mirror in his quarters overnight, he reported waking up at 3:17 a.m. and precisely for several nights in a row with the feeling that someone else was standing just behind him. When he turned to check, there was never anyone there. But the mirror, it was warm, almost like it had absorbed body heat. They ran light tests on it. The mirror reflected infrared wavelengths, but not visible ones. It could see in complete darkness. Even stranger, when placed in a completely sealed chamber, cameras recorded faint pulsing from its surface like heartbeats. The oldest tribe in that region, the Carey, had no known writings about such a mirror. but when an elder woman was shown a photo of it. In the 1980s, she reportedly began to cry. She whispered a word no one could translate. Later she said, through a translator, "It's how the sky spoke to them. The ones before us. The ones who dug without hands." From there, the stories darkened. People who stared into the mirror too long claimed to see rooms that didn't exist, places they'd never been. One university assistant believed she saw herself, but older, standing on a hill of glass under a red sky. Another claimed he saw someone looking back from the other side of the mirror, blinking. What unnerved the researchers most was that all descriptions matched each other. Different people, same visions, the same hills, the same red sky, the same watcher. Eventually, the mirror was moved, first to a research lab in Quito, then to the private museum where it remains, but the strange followed. Security guards say lights near the vaults flicker for no reason. One cleaner refused to re-enter the building after passing by the mirror one night and seeing her own reflection smile back, even though she hadn't. No dating test has succeeded. The obsidian is volcanic, yes, but unnaturally smooth. No chisel marks, no tool signs. It appears to have been grown, not shaped. The mirror remains undamaged. It has been dropped, frozen, exposed to fire, even x-rayed. Nothing leaves a mark, and it still reflects heat, though not light. It has no maker, no origin, no known function. Some fringe theorists believe it's a form of communication device, not for speaking, but watching. That it was part of a network, a forgotten surveillance system of a civilization far older than we dare admit. Others fear it was never meant to be found. That whoever or whatever used it has always been watching back, and maybe still is, the sealed cavern of the breathless city. In the high plateaus of Bolivia, near a place no map dares to label, shepherds sometimes speak of a mountain that hums not loudly, just low enough to make your ears strain in silence, as if the earth itself is whispering a warning. For centuries, the locals have avoided this slope, believing it to be cursed. But in 1976, a team of speleologists, cave explorers, followed the vibration. What they found was not a cave. The opening was narrow, barely wide enough for a human shoulder. But past the stone throat, it widened unnaturally. The rock was smooth as though carved, not eroded, and the air inside was dead still. Not cold, not warm, just breathless. That's what one of them later said. It felt like we'd stepped into something not meant to be opened. The air had forgotten how to move. They lowered ropes, brought oxygen tanks just in case. The descent took them nearly 80 m straight down, and then it stopped at a door. It wasn't wood, not stone. It was metallic, but unlike any metal tested before, black and smooth and without hinges. A perfect circle carved in the middle showed a pattern of 3 intersecting triangles, a symbol not known in any Andean culture. They didn't open it. It opened for them. The circle spun slowly, and the metal split with a sound that wasn't mechanical. It was like something exhaling for the first time in 1,000 years. And beyond that door was silence. A tunnel pitch black, descending further than their lights could reach. They debated turning back, but explorers rarely listened to fear. Inside, the walls changed. Not raw stone, but tiled. Inlays of copper etched with geometric forms resembling constellations, though not ours. Not any we've charted. One of the explorers, a German named Kielman, touched the copper. It was warm, almost alive. They entered a vast chamber and found a city buried under the mountain. Domes of some crystal-like material rose from the cavern floor. Roads paved with shimmering black stone curved through a layout so precise it could only have been designed with knowledge of magnetic fields. At the center stood a tower, slender and spiraling with no doors, just a single floating orb hovering above its apex, slowly rotating. They found no bones, no tools, no signs of human life. But there were seats built for bodies, not chairs but smooth. Formations resembling shells grown, not built, each arranged around the orb at the tower's base. One of the explorers, a Bolivian-born man named Casillo, said he heard something in that moment. Not voices, not wind, something deeper like a vibration in his chest. He described it as a thought that wasn't his. It simply said, "We are paused." They stayed underground for 6 hours. They took nothing. The machines they brought stopped working past the doorway. Flashlights dimmed. Even the air thinned, forcing them back out. They sealed the entrance, not out of fear, but respect. The footage never made it public. All that remains is Casillo's journal, which surfaced in 1999 when a collector in La Paz tried to auction it anonymously. It contains drawings, impossibly precise sketches of the orb, the triangular emblem, and maps of a city that has no reason to exist. Pages of strange text, a language we don't know. And underlined on one torn page, a phrase in Spanish, "No es un lugar, es una pa," is not a place. It is a pause. Some think it's not a city at all, but something dormant waiting. Others believe it was built not for humans, but for something older. Observers or travelers who used Earth like a stopover and left. And the most chilling theory that they didn't leave. They're still there, paused beneath the breathless stone, the lantern that burned without flame. In the vast deserts of central Iran, beyond the edges of known caravan trails and long abandoned Silk Road branches, there exists a crumbling citadel swallowed by time and sand. Its name has been forgotten, its towers reduced to weathered stumps. No maps chart its location, and even satellite imagery blurs its outline, as if the Earth itself refuses to remember what stood there. And yet, something remains, buried beneath centuries of dust and half-collapsed stone. Archaeologists uncovered a sealed room in 2011. It wasn't much more than a square chamber, no decorations, no doors, just a descending shaft from above and thick, dry silence. The only object inside was a lantern, but it wasn't made of metal or glass. Its material couldn't be identified. The object was smooth and cold like obsidian, but pulsed faintly with a dull red light, flickering without source or heat. It sat upright, balanced perfectly in the center of the room, atop a ring of blackened sand, as if something had burned there long ago. But there was no wick, no fuel, and no residue. The lantern hadn't gone out. It was still lit. They moved it gently, with specialized instruments. The glow didn't dim. A physicist brought in to analyze. The artifact measured no thermal radiation, no electromagnetic field, but instruments placed near it began to fail. Watches stopped ticking. Batteries drained. Even when the lantern was removed, the room retained a sensation, something the excavation team could not quite put into words. As if the walls were watching. Sleep researchers were invited, not for science, but because a member of the excavation team had begun to speak in his sleep in ancient dialects he couldn't possibly have known. He described a room not unlike the one they found, but buried far deeper with many more lanterns. He called it the Vault of Embers. He passed away 2 weeks later without ever waking up. Iranian authorities closed the dig site within days. Officially, they cited environmental hazards, unstable tunnels, extreme heat, and risk of cave-ins, but the team's reports were quietly confiscated. The artifact was said to have been moved to a private facility near the Iran. As of 2024, no photos of it have been released. No official analysis published, but one technician, who later left the project, posted anonymously to a fringe archaeology forum. His message was short. It read, "We tested everything. The glow doesn't reflect in mirrors. It doesn't register on cameras. You only see it with your eyes, and it makes you feel like someone is looking through you. When you study ancient artifacts, there's usually a thread to follow, a culture, a language, a ritual context. But this lantern, it breaks those rules. There are no other known objects like it. No written record. No lore passed down through oral traditions. It's as if it was made by something that didn't want it to be understood, only found. Or perhaps it wasn't meant to be found at all. Local desert tribes, when pressed, tell a story about a flame that sleeps beneath the sand. According to them, the citadel was once a place of healing, not by medicine, but by light. They say travelers would come not to be cured of illness, but of memory. The lanterns inside were said to burn away your past, until even your own name felt like a stranger's. They call it the forgetting light. And they warn, Once you've seen its glow, something follows. One of the strangest aspects of this mystery lies not with the artifact itself, but with those who encountered it. Of the 11-person team who first uncovered the lantern, 6 have since suffered from sleep disorders. 3 have developed a rare form of epilepsy. 1 disappeared in 2015 after withdrawing all funds and leaving a message for his family that simply read, "I'm going deeper, and alas, she's still alive. Her name is Yasmin Daria." She was a junior geochemist at the time responsible for analyzing mineral traces in the room stone. In 2022, she published a memoir under a pseudonym, which was quietly pulled from bookstores after only 3 weeks, but copies survive online. In one chapter, she writes, "The lantern didn't glow. I remember that light. It wasn't a light at all. It was a kind of presence. It didn't fill the room. It emptied it. Every sound, every thought, every heartbeat felt like it didn't belong, like I was inside something else's memory." This raises a chilling possibility. What if the lantern wasn't placed there for us to find, but for something else to return to? Other teams have reportedly tried to revisit the site, but every attempt has been halted, either by sandstorms, equipment failures, or unexplained interference. One expedition in 2019 never even made it to the perimeter. Their GPS systems looped endlessly, bringing them back to the same dried-out creek bed over and over, no matter how far they walked. Some believe the lantern emits more than light, that it bends perception, twists memory, perhaps even time, and yet it still burns. Why? Who built it? What did it light up? A city? A ritual? A warning? Or was it never meant to illuminate anything, but instead to contain something? Think about it. A room with no entrance. A lantern that glows without heat, without shadow. A sand floor scorched in a perfect circle. What was burning, and where did it go? The unmelting core of the silent glacier. In the furthest stretch of the Greenland interior, there is a glacier that doesn't move. It has a name on the maps, at least Vesli's Breen. But among Inuit elders, it's called something different. They call it Inakanardo, which loosely translates to the one that doesn't breathe. Unlike the other glaciers around it, Vesli's Breen doesn't creak, doesn't shift, doesn't cave ice into the sea. It just even satellite data confirms it. While every other glacier in Greenland shifts by inches or meters each year, this one has remained entirely unmoving. Not since tracking began in the 1960s, not even by a centimeter, as if it's anchored to something deeper than rock. In 2016, a glaciology team funded by the Danish Climate Initiative set up camp there to figure out why. They weren't looking for mysteries. They were expecting ice core samples, flow readings, maybe mineral anomalies. But what they found was something no scientific theory could explain. Roughly 70 m below the surface, they struck a solid structure. At first, they assumed it was a naturalized formation, dense layers compressed over millennia. But core samples showed something different. The ice was not water-based. It didn't melt, even under direct thermal drilling, even under blowtorches, even under acid. And within that core, at exactly 732 m down, they found a single sphere about the size of a melon. It was embedded in the ice, suspended like a seed in amber. It pulsed softly, not with light, but with motion, as if something inside was shifting ever so slightly. Some on the team thought it was a device. Others thought it was biological. But no one could agree on where it came from or how long it had been there. Carbon dating couldn't be performed. There was no organic material, no radiation, no magnetic field, no indication it was from Earth at all. They tried to extract it, but the moment they began to chip away the ice around it, the temperature inside the borehole dropped, not rose by almost 60 degrees Celsius. The walls of the tunnel began to crystallize in geometric patterns, forming what looked like snowflakes, but weren't snow at all. One of the scientists, Lars Friedman, touched a fragment with a gloved hand. The glove froze instantly. So did the skin beneath. He would later describe it as touching the memory of cold, not the temperature itself. 2 more researchers reported hearing something inside the ice. Not a voice exactly, not words, more like breath. A single slow inhale like the glacier had finally exhaled after centuries and was now waking up. The team left within the week. Officially, the expedition ended due to equipment failure and weather hazards. Unofficially, 3 of the members requested transfers. 1 left glaciology entirely. Another reportedly entered psychiatric care. The logs from their final week at Vesely's Breen remain redacted. And the sphere, it's still there. No one has tried to remove it again, not even after all this time. But in 2020, an amateur satellite technician working on polar imagery noticed something strange. The temperature around the glacier, just a 1 radius, was steadily dropping. While the rest of Greenland warms year after year, Vesely's Bream gets colder. Not seasonally, not cyclically, permanently. Was the unmelting core? Is it ancient? Is it alive? Is it waiting? Some of the local elders believe it's a prison. That what lies inside that glacier isn't an object, but a memory frozen in place. Something so old, so heavy with knowing that the Earth itself had to stop it from spreading. They say that when the sphere was first placed in the glacier, birds fell from the sky, that the ice grew. Overnight like a tomb. There's no evidence for this, no written record, no carvings. But the fear in their voices feels older than story. And one elder who agreed to speak only once whispered something strange. It isn't sleeping, it's listening, and every year we talk louder. Please consider subscribing if you want to keep exploring these kinds of untold ancient mysteries. These stories take time and care to uncover, and your support helps keep them alive. And if you felt something from this story, let me know in the comments what you'd like to see improved or what theories it brought to your mind. Now close your eyes. Let the stillness of the glacier settle in. Let the cold drift past your thoughts like falling snow. And wonder what else lies unmelting beneath the